Yeah, so I was born in Miami, Florida. I lived with my mom and brother. My parents divorced when I was just a few months old. Um, and I lived a part of my childhood in Nicaragua. Just because my mom found herself with little support. So part of my childhood, like from 2 to 5 years old, I was in Nicaragua. Just that's where I really got immersed with my family. Spanish was my first language. And eventually I came back to the States. I grew up Catholic. We would go to Sunday Mass. From what I remember as a child, I don't remember going to much groups as a kid. I know that my brother was more involved with the youth groups and whatnot, and so was my mom. During college, I would go to Sunday Mass, but also I kind of fell into the habits that many people in college just kind of stray away from the faith. Um, and it took a while before I came back. I never stopped being Catholic, but I know that I didn't live coherently. And it just naturally, I didn't understand the value of my faith, you know? And of course, like with an environment that could be very polarized, there were many contentious things that I wrestled with that maybe I didn't agree with the church at that time. So, I was just like, oh, it's a thing to do on Sundays. But even though that might have been my mentality, I know my mom throughout our life, especially because the whole story of reconciliation with my father, especially because he wasn't around. My mom was always somebody who always tried her best to instill Catholic Christian values. She would always motivate us for prayer. She would always uh, encourage us to be forgiving. She would have us pray the rosary. She really, really was the pillar of our faith in our household. Even though I didn't like the rosary growing up, I remember as a kid when we would take trips, say to Disney World, I would pretend to be asleep, and my brother would just be like, "Stop trying to sleep," during the rosary, because I felt it so monotonous. And the irony of life is that the rosary was one of the tools that led me to a religious vocation eventually. Um, so I was always Catholic. I never stopped being Catholic, but I definitely did have a spectrum of like where it was just kind of secondary, tertiary to eventually becoming primary. Around the time of my confirmation, which was about in 2018, so that would be about like almost 7 years at this point. Yeah, 7 years since my confirmation. Yeah, I didn't get a confirmation as an adolescent. It was just something that we never got around to it. But I'm glad in a sense that it happened that way because I was able to make that decision as a young adult and really commit to the faith. It really started after I received confirmation. The idea of a religious vocation or anything like being called, I truly did not get a sense of that until after my confirmation. And for me, my vocation story feels like a testimony and witness to the sacrament of confirmation. What ended up happening was I got confirmed May 2018. That summer, I had started to develop a close relationship with Our Lady and started praying the Rosary more. But that summer was the first time I remember being at Mass and hearing "sell all your things and follow me" in a way that was very pointed. Like I felt that was talking to me. And that was the first time. I mean, sure, I had been to Sunday Mass plenty of times, and I'm sure I've heard "sell all your things and follow me," but this was the first time I felt it pointed directly to me. And I was scared. I was like, what do you mean, sell all your things and follow me? For a little bit of context, I had been working as a music therapist for a hospice company. So I used music as a means of comfort management for people who were at end of life receiving palliative care. And so as a music therapist, we use a variety of instruments, usually guitar, piano, my voice. But I was a wind instrumentalist, still am, a wind instrumentalist, and I have a plethora of hand percussion. So you're telling the musician who's serving at end of life, who's having very meaningful occupational experiences, profound moments at end of life, being able to be a comfort for patients and their families at the end of their lives. You're telling that man who uses instruments to sell all your things and follow you. You see, like, there's a little bit of a contention there, right? Like, I was just like, oh, so I wrestled with that for a long time. And another Psalm 110 that says, "You are a priest according to the order of Melchizedek," and you felt very pointed, and I'm like, what do you mean me? Like me, like what do you mean me? I was so scared of the idea. Because again, I was working in the environment of death, dying, and bereavement, an environment that in and of itself is a vocation. Because to be able to work, it's like some people have the patience to work with children, but to have the mental fortitude to be able to endure, to dive into other people's pain, and to be able to walk with people at end of life, like that, I don't say like, oh, I have the skill set, but I do like recognize it does require a grace, and that it is a gift from God that I've received. And so I think about that, like I'm doing such meaningful work. I've had the grace of being at present at time of death, and you want me to follow you. You want me to let go of this. So I obviously resisted to the idea. October of that year, I was visiting a patient, and I was using music as a means to help with her pain management. Distract her from her pain, singing songs that she would like that she's familiar with. She would be singing along. We would have some hand percussion. It was great. She had a large vanity, like one of those like large mirrors, and I was wearing a black polo as part of my uniform. And I remember I'm playing music. I look to the mirror. I see myself with the clerical, like the little collar. I blink and it's gone. I was like, what? What was that? So I finished my visit, albeit very quickly, because that was too tangible. Like I saw it with my two eyes. I saw myself wearing a clerical. I blinked and it was gone. And I thought I was going crazy. I went to my car. I just sat in silence and I'm like, Dios mío, because it was in Spanish. I was like, Dios mío, ¿qué está pasando? Like, Lord, what is going on? Because I was just like, I was literally shook at. Like, I was like, this is a bit much. At the end of that month, I went to Bogota, Colombia to receive a retreat for my young adult community, ITER 412. And I went to that retreat with the intention of like, okay, asking Our Lady, what do you mean by this? I've been working as a music therapist. You know how meaningful this work has been. Help me figure this out. Because that was pretty intense. I'm running away, but the Lord is chasing me through scripture, and it feels intense, and I don't know what you want from me. And so I went to that retreat. I felt that I needed to see my service as a music therapist not so much as a career, but more as like an apostolate, like my way of serving the kingdom of God. So already there had begun that shift. I wasn't concerned about my own occupational success. I wasn't looking to get in a better position, but I was just using the gifts and talents I had received to serve God in the means of hospice care. And so I ran away from the idea of a religious vocation. It kind of just went to the back. I went through a Theology of the Body conference in 2019. Summer 2019 was August. And I saw a CFR friar from the Franciscans of the Renewal. He was there, and I saw his habit. And I was just so engrossed by the habit. I couldn't stop looking at it. And it's interesting because the color of the CFR habit, first of all, the design is just like the Capuchin habit, but it's gray. The gray habit used to be the missionary habit for the Capuchins. So I didn't know that at that time. But the missionary habit for the Capuchins was a gray one, just like the CFRs have now. So it's like the Lord was showing me a Capuchin habit without realizing it was a Capuchin habit. But I was engrossed by it. I just intrigued, and I just remember I could not stop looking at the friar. Then in November of 2019, a couple of my friends were in seminary, and we went to Universal Studios. I think it was for Black Friday weekend. And the whole running joke was, when are you going to become a seminarian? When are you going to become a seminarian? When are you going to become a seminarian? And they were like poking that bear, and I'm like, I don't want to become a seminarian. Why do you keep asking me this? And it was a good time, but it was a wonderful experience of prayer and fraternity that I didn't realize I needed. And, it was the first time I was praying the Liturgy of the Hours at all, but also with brothers. Sure, they're seminarians, but they're my seminarian brothers. And just to experience a weekend of fraternity was, again, I didn't realize it was something I needed. And so Sunday, we're at Mass, I believe that it's called the Basilica of Our Lady of the Universe. I believe it's in Orlando, Florida. It's a huge basilica, beautiful. And the priest, the celebrant, he's asking around like, "Oh, who's visiting?" Because it's Thanksgiving weekend, and people are from Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, and it's four of us. My friend Gabriel is one of them. He raises his hand and says, "Oh, we're from Miami. We're three seminarians, and my friend, we're from Miami." And the priest says, "Four seminarians from Miami." And I'm here like, dear Lord, I don't know what. Everyone's clapping, like, "Oh my goodness, we have four seminarians." And I'm like, dear God, he definitely said three. I look at Gabriel. Gabriel's like, "I said three." I'm like, "I know you said three." And the other two guys are laughing. They're floored. And I'm like, and the priest is like, "Okay, I want to see you guys after mass because I want to talk to you guys, check in how you're doing, etc." I disappear. This is a basilica. This place is massive. There was an image of the Pieta of Our Lady holding Christ. I'm just like, I'm just gonna hide. And I was observing the priest just to make sure the coast was clear, and I stayed out of sight until the priest was gone because I'm just like, no, absolutely not. But at that point, I was like, okay, I can't run away from that. That was a little too fierce, That was like, ugh. When I first started my devotion to the Rosary, I prayed to Our Lady, like, "Mom, help me out because otherwise it's not gonna happen." And I use that same verbiage as far as getting a spiritual director. It's like, "Mom, help me out. If you want this to happen, you make it happen because otherwise it's not going to happen." Within a week, I had a spiritual director. So it's kind of like, okay, things are moving. I got connected with a Jesuit, and I started to receive spiritual direction January 2020. And that was very short lived because 2020 was the year of the pandemic and then the quarantine happened. Now, that initial spiritual direction was good because it definitely began a process of like helping reconcile my past. Because I definitely had many things of my past that I felt unworthy, to be called to a religious vocation. Um, but I lost contact with the Jesuit. Um, I was working in the inpatient units throughout the pandemic, so I didn't have the quarantine experience that most of the world had. I had to dress up in a yellow suit, look like a Teletubby, and go visit patients. That was my experience. I got connected with another spiritual director of my parish in Our Lady of Lourdes in Miami. And the encouragement that he gave me was, well, because something I haven't added was, in 2019, I started working in the inpatient unit. So I used to work in the community, visiting patients in their homes. But in 2019, in the summer, I transferred to the inpatient unit. So patients who had acute conditions would come to the unit and they would receive treatment there to help manage the symptoms and then go back. I would encounter so much more spiritual pain than I did when I would visit people at home because death was more imminent, spiritual pain was more acute, and my repertoire became more and more spiritual, whether it was Catholic, Christian, Evangelical, Baptist, even Jewish. I had to sing in Hebrew sometimes. And I noticed it was incredibly fulfilling to help people and walk with people through their spiritual pain. I'm still serving as a music therapist, but since music is my primary medium and people have such a strong affinity with music and faith, that's what I found myself doing in the units. And so my spiritual director in 2020, he encourages me, like, since, you know, since you're interested in religious orders, since I had always been drawn to the idea of religious community, which I feel was an expression of running away from the idea of becoming a diocesan priest. And I say that in retrospect. But he told me, look for a religious order that has a charism in healthcare because the Lord has spoken through you in that environment. And he also told me, you need to discern with the diocesan priest because you can't say no to something you haven't discerned. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'll get in touch with the vocation director. So I got in touch with Father Matthew Gomez, who was the vocation director at that time. And I started looking for religious orders that had a charism in healthcare. I found two. The Camillians, which is the Order of St. Camillus of Lellis, and then the Hospitaller Brothers of St. John of God. Um, I contacted both of them, and I only ever heard back from the Hospitaller Brothers of St. John of God. I never heard back from the Camillians. But I got connected with the Brothers of St. John of God, and they gave me with this Vision Vocation Network survey, and Father Matthew from the diocese of of Miami, the Archdiocese, he had also given me the same survey. So I took the survey. It's basically answer a bunch of questions, and the survey will match you with different religious orders to see, based on how you answered, you would be a good fit for these. So I get the list. It was like 6 or 7 that was 100% match. And I saw actually this very logo. I saw this very logo there, this little Capuchin logo. I don't know if you can see it, but and I saw Capuchin, and it just grabbed my attention. It's just like, oh, that looks interesting. So I clicked it. It connected to the Facebook page, and I was wondering, why was there a Jedi convention in front of me? I saw a bunch of friars, and I'm like, I've never seen so many Jedis. What's going on here? And I'm scrolling, I'm reading, I'm just like, oh, Capuchin Franciscans, okay. Oh, Padre Pio, yeah, yeah, I know, I've heard of Padre Pio. And like, oh, St. Francis, okay, you're scrolling. Poverty, charism and poverty. I'm like, nope, I don't want to be poor. He already told me, like, sell all your things and follow me. I'm like, I'm not there yet. No, I can't do that. So I closed the page, and I was like, let me focus on these brothers of St. John of God, because, I have these. I told them I took the survey, but I didn't tell them about my findings or what I experienced. So I went I would visit every Tuesday, the Brothers of St. John of God, because they happened to be 10 minutes away from my job. So it would be right after work. I would go have evening prayer and dinner with them. And it was an incredibly fruitful time because I got to definitely have a better understanding of the evangelical counsels like poverty, chastity, and obedience. Especially with poverty, I realized that, yes, while there's a call to live austerely and simply, when it came to my instruments, for example, since these were the tools of my trade, as a matter of fact, that phrase, tool of your trade, I learned that through these brothers, and I recognized, like, well, these are your tools that you use to provide your service. So, yes, you can take them with you because these are the gifts and talents the Lord has given you. But when you make a vow of poverty, it's not your property anymore. It's not under your name, you know. It belongs to the order, it belongs to the community, you know? And I was like, oh, okay. I was like more okay with that. I was like, okay, well, I still get access to them because I come in. Like, just to give you an idea, the charge nurse of the unit I worked would often say, what he has in instruments, he could probably make a really good down payment in a really fancy car. And she's not wrong. She's not wrong. I here in postulancy, I have my guitar, ukulele, and an ocarina, but that's like pales in comparison to the amount of instruments I have back home in Miami. So, anyways, along with that, as I was working in the hospice units during the pandemic, there was the whole crisis of PPE shortage and lack of disinfecting supplies, and there was a call by our leadership to not use instruments, to just go in with yourself, because since we have such a shortage of disinfecting supplies, and I mean, there wasn't even a vaccine for COVID at that time. Like, this was when it was new, and um, we just didn't know. So I was told, like, do not use any of your instruments. If you must sing a cappella or use a tablet, like, figure it out. And so that experience taught me that I could be of service. I could still be a music therapist without my instruments. So not only did I have the Brothers of St. John of God explain to me poverty, but I also had concurrently this experience working in the inpatient units that literally showed me, the Lord showed me, you don't need your instruments to help be a comfort to people at the end of their lives. And that was a profound lesson for me, like, wow, yeah, I realized, like, just my presence, my voice, and my prayers was all I had, you know. And it was difficult. I mean, I say dressing up like a Teletubby just to make light of the situation, but it really was like the amount of layerings we had to put, like double mask, an N95, the regular mask, the two pairs of gloves, like it was a lot. But I learned, I saw, and I recognized, yeah, I had to have that sincerity, to recognize I really don't need my instruments. And so, January 2021, um, I'm in a group chat with my friends because we're all discerning. And I tell my friends, I think I'm okay with poverty. Like, I think I have a much better understanding with it now. That same day, that same group of people were in an Instagram chat, And one of my friends sends me a post from the Capuchins of the Stigmata Eastern Province that the Capuchins are moving to Little Havana, Miami, Florida. The day that I said, hey, I'm okay with poverty. I think I'm okay with this. Really? You're okay with poverty? Well, right there, right in front of you. See, the friars were in Fort Lauderdale. And the joke of every Miamian is Fort Lauderdale is like about an hour and change, depending on what part of Miami you live in. But Disney World, which is Orlando, Florida, Central Florida, it's about 4 hours away. Fort Lauderdale's too far, but Disney World, no problem. We'll make that trip to Disney World, but for anything Fort Lauderdale, it's too far. So now they're coming to Little Havana, which is 15 minutes from my job. It's just kind of like, okay, all right, you're really like making it impossible to say no. Just like the four seminarians, and now this is like, so really, I didn't find the Capuchins. The Lord brought them to me. It's kind of, I didn't know much about St. Francis other than I knew he was a saint, just like you know about St. Anthony, just like you know about Padre Pio, because there was a significant devotion to Padre Pio in Miami. But it's just like, you hear of these saints, but I didn't really know any of them. And the Lord, like, he put the Capuchins in front of me. It's like, this is where I want you. I'm just like, "Ugh." Okay. So I get in contact. With Father Francisco, my vocation director, and I start like this process of monthly phone calls to check in. I want to see when I could visit the friars. He's like, oh well, we're not settled in yet. Then I think it was like February or March. It's like, oh, we have like this roofing issue. We need a permit, so the brothers aren't moved in yet. April or May, like the brothers are there, but they all have COVID. So it's like, you know. I was like, Lord, you brought them here, and I'm just like, I'm here, like I'm on. I wanna meet them already. And it wasn't until like a conversation in May that Father Francisco told me, he's like, I feel a little bad because you haven't been able to visit our brothers in Miami yet, but we're gonna have a come and see retreat weekend this summer. Do you have a time off set off already scheduled? And I did, because usually the end of the summer, the end of June, early July, I tend to take off with my family because it's like a triple, quadruple birthday. It's my brother's June 20th, I'm June 28th, and my mom and aunt, who are twins, are July 1st. So we usually just take all that time off. And so I had already taken the weekend before my birthday off, and Father Francisco is like, okay, I'll schedule the come and see for that weekend. And I was like, wow, okay, great. And I told Mom I want to do this. And she tells me it's in Delaware and I'm in Miami. And she's like, okay, cool. But you're not taking a plane there. If you're gonna go to the retreat, you need to drive because we were living with our grandmother at that time. And thanks be to God, she's gonna be 95 this year. But a 90-year-old lady in the middle of the COVID pandemic, like we were like Fort Knox. Our home was completely like barricaded. She was very vulnerable. And so since we didn't know how COVID was going to behave in a plane and people were going out and everything's airborne, she's like, you're not getting on a plane. If you're going to this retreat, you need to drive. Well, my aunt lives in Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, which is on the border of South Carolina and Georgia. So I decided, like, I leave on a Thursday, the retreat starts on a Friday, so I'll drive Thursday and Friday. And that was a very difficult drive because between the 2 days, it was probably like 26 hours of driving. And that in and of itself was an experience because Thursday was fine, except I drank so much coffee that I couldn't sleep the next day. And I was up all night long until like 3 a.m. in the morning. And my plan was to leave at 5 a.m. in the morning. So then I left around 5 or 6 in the morning from Georgia to Delaware. And that was a very difficult drive. Something about driving in Virginia was incredibly aggressive. Like I crossed that state line and it was incredibly aggressive. And I started hearing a voice that was telling me, turn back. This is going to be a waste of time. It's going to be a waste of time. Don't even bother. You're tired. You're exhausted. Just quit. And I, through my spiritual direction, because there was a lot of Ignatian spirituality, especially when I started with the Jesuits, like being able to recognize what is of God, what is not of God, what is myself. It felt very malicious. Like this, like, turn around. You're wasting your time. Like, give up. Kind of like someone, like if someone's on the floor and I'm being kicked while on the floor. And I just parked. I'm just like, okay, if the devil's being this petty about this, then I really have to go to this retreat. So I remember pulling up at a Subway's at a gas station, and just texting Father Francisco, I'm terribly exhausted. I need a nap. I need to eat. I'll be there. I'll be late, but please pray for me. And they were like, no problem. Don't worry. Just get here safely. And so I did. Thanks be to God. I made it. I got to Delaware. I landed, and I received the Come and See retreat. And the peace that I felt at the end of that Come and See retreat was like nothing I had ever experienced before. I bring to mind, I believe it's the Book of Kings, the story of Elijah, how like he's looking for God and in the tempest and the fire, and things that are big and mighty, but then the Lord appeared to him in a whisper. And I lived that. I was just at the end of the retreat. The retreat ended on a Sunday, but I was going to drive back on Monday. I just laid on a hammock and I just felt this stillness that gave me the assurance like this is what you've been looking for. I just knew. It wasn't like, yeah, you thought it was like a big revelation. It's like it's gonna be amazing and big fanfare. No, it's just a very simple like yes. It's a very simple yes. And so, of course, immediately, then I wanted to sell off my things and move in because they have like this residential candidacy program, how they invite some candidates if they have any outstanding loans to live with them and work it off. That way they get used to the community life and whatnot. But Father Francisco stopped me. He's like, okay, wait a second. You have a really good paying job. Used to have loans to pay because we had taken out, my family and I took out a 401k loan to pay for a house, and I still had the car loan I was paying off. So he's like, keep your job. It pays well. You know, visit the brothers in Miami. Ironically, I met one of the Miami friars in Delaware before I actually met him in Miami. So it was really funny to have that happen. Brian, Brother Brian. And so yeah, then the same habit I discerned out of the Brothers of St. John of God. And then I started meeting weekly with the Capuchins. And I did that for about 2 years. Did that for about 2 years. And I really, really established my rapport with them, you know. Um, I would meet for evening prayer and dinner, and I felt that same fraternity and prayer that I experienced when I had that weekend with the seminarian brothers. Because when I was with the Brothers of St. John of God, yes, we had a prayer life, but it was more apostolic. It was more like ministry focused, you know. And the sense of fraternity was there, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. But with the Capuchins, first of all, there was this depth of prayer, this depth of contemplative prayer that I felt really drawn to, especially because of my devotion to the Rosary. But this aspect of fraternity that my heart had been longing for, and I had found it. So, I would meet weekly, and I eventually applied. I had to get deferred for a year. It was a recommendation by a psychologist just to get deferred for a year. And, you know, it was actually a very good thing that I got deferred for a year. I got to definitely tie some loose ends that I needed to tie up. And the fact of the matter is that because I was deferred a year, and the brothers made it abundantly clear, it's like, we've come to know you. It's not a no. But every person in religious life, in one way, at one point or another, will probably have to see a therapist because the demands of this life is just unlike any other, you know? So the psychologist made a recommendation that I receive psychotherapy for some time, and so I did. And the what the brothers did though, just to help me have a sense of transition, was they invited me to live as a residential candidate in the Miami Friary because I had been, I had known them for already for 2 years at this point. So it was July of 2023 when I moved in with the friars in Miami. And they gave me the opportunity. It's like, you can take this or not, but it's an opportunity for you to have like a tangible, next step. You still keep your old job. You use your insurance to pay for the psychotherapy. And it was great. Honestly, it was such a vindicating experience to be with a therapist and to really, really process things that I didn't realize needed processing. Um, and the fact of the matter is that, like, okay, I was deferred to this year, and this year I'm one of 11 postulants, you know? Well, right now, 8, because 3 of the guys have left through their discernment. But 1 out of 11. Had I come last year, I would have been one of 3, you know? And what a gift it has been for me to be part of such a large fraternity. like I know that if I was here last year, like I don't think I would have had the same sense of fulfillment that I had now. And the Lord has been so precise with me, because even before filling out the application, something I forgot to mention was that one of my concerns, was like, how is my family going to do with the finances? It's my mom, brother, and I, and the three of us divide our expenses quite evenly. And it was the beginning of January 2022, so this was like before a year and a half before I moved in. Both my mom and brother received a raise without any prompt. It's just like, you heard my complaint, concern, not really complaint, like my concern, like, how's my family going to do without me? And you gave both of them a raise, like significant raise. Okay, I see you. And then I get sponsored to pay off my car loan. $5,000. The friars made it a point. It's like, we really do think you would be a very good friar, and we need you to understand that this is not a no. But the psychologist got something, and we think it would be a really good idea. Every friar, every person has to go through this at some point. Yours is just going to be at the very beginning, and these are just going to be tools to help you. And that is absolutely right. Father Robert Williams, he was the one who told me that. He's now in the council, the general council in Rome. He was a provincial for a little bit, but now he's in Rome. But yeah, those were his words. So, I went through that, and I lived with the friars that year. Still was working my hospice job, but I lived with the friars, and having that candidacy, because I still had significant autonomy. I was just living with them, but I had joining them for prayer was optional. But of course, the amount of immersion I did was to my own benefit. So of course I would be there for morning meditation and prayer and evening prayer as well. And if I could join them in ministries in the evening, I would. If I couldn't because I was on call for work, then I couldn't. I still had to attend to my duties. But I lived there until March of 2024. And then at the end of March of 2024 was when I moved to Delaware as a pre-postulancy, just to kind of help us more immersely, more totally live in community. I had tied all my loose ends. I was able to um, say my goodbyes at work. And so I lived in Delaware as a pre-postulancy from March all the way to July. And then end of July was when I moved here to Milwaukee. And one of the first realizations I made, because the experience in Delaware um, was different than my experience in Miami. Just the degrees of autonomy, the degree of dependence that I had, and also like I was fully living in community Monday, like 7 days a week in Delaware, whereas in Miami I would be in the friary Monday through Friday, but the weekends I was encouraged to visit my family, so I would do that. I would spend the weekends at home with my mom and brother. Um, when I got to here in Milwaukee and we received the orientation, and I was just hearing the details of like what responsibilities we were gonna have or how the structure was gonna be, I realized, wow, this experience I'm going through right now is literally a combination of the experience I had in Miami with the experience I had in Delaware, and just put together. And I was just like, oh my God, you really just had me, you gave me a year to prepare, gave me two very different experiences, you know, a degree of autonomy, but then a degree of dependency, and then this in between experience where I still have my duties and responsibilities, but I also still have a dependency on my community to some degree. And you gave me an entire year to prepare for this. Like something that felt like you're being deferred for a year, and it felt like the worst pain was actually totally for my benefit, you know? Like I get chills just here thinking about it. So like everything is just it like the Lord has put it on a platter. It's like, here it is. Like he's literally made it impossible for me to say no. you know? And it's a grace that I've been living in community for now for a year and a half. Because otherwise it would have been just about half a year because of the experience that I had. And I feel like there's definitely been a lot of struggles and blessings I've encountered in postulancy. I think having lived in different friaries and different communities, I get expectations, I get habits I learn, and then when I'm in another friary, it's like, oh, okay, things are done a little differently here. And learning to be detached, to to hold certain things loosely, and to see God at work, and how the Holy Spirit moves people from different communities, and also just put myself in a position of receptivity, just like Our Lady. Like Our Lady was receptive, she received, and trying to imitate Our Lady. I've definitely learned being with brothers that I could be really jealous. I didn't realize I was gonna be a jealous person ever. But since I started postulancy, like, oh man, like the brothers from my province, like I've had to share them. I've had to share fraternity, and I'm just like, oh man, I didn't realize I could be a real jealous person. And that like rude, it felt like a bucket of ice water because throughout my life, throughout Miami, I never really dealt with jealousy. Not something I encountered, but living in community, that's something I've encountered. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you trying to show me through the jealousy? Because this feels terrible. Like petty jealousy, like that temptation is horrible, man. It's just like it's petty. That's what it is. It's just like, ugh. But it's like something in the first few months, I definitely struggled it because I would have like moments of like fear of missing out if I wasn't doing something with my brothers. I definitely noticed. I learned that I'm very agreeable. My personality is very agreeable, so I can very easily forego what I want if everyone else wants to do something else. And so I've had to learn a sense of autonomy, like, and I've been encouraged by my brothers. We like you best when you are yourself. So please, like, even if what you want is a bit of an outlier, like, please be who you are. Like, my brother postulants have told me this. It's like we think like we see you perform best when you trust yourself. And it's like how abundantly and thoroughly loved I am, not only by my postulant brothers, but also by the friars here, the fully professed friars, that it's like, okay, yeah, what's the point of jealousy? Like no one here is being malicious. And so like it's something for me to work at, and I'm using like these objective experiences to help fight these distortions that I'm tempted with, between FOMO or like feeling that like I'm not good enough, comparing myself. That's also like an expression of jealousy. That sense of sadness you get because, somebody receives more attention than you. Like all these things. I've had to come face to face with so many aspects of my life in the last year, and then the last like really 8 months since I moved to Delaware, but more acutely since I started postulancy. But I've allowed myself to go through that process because I realized I could have easily resisted. I realized I could have very easily um, put like tensed up and doubled down, but that would have only been to my detriment. Formation. We're being formed, we're being molded. Be sincere, be honest, but be receptive. And just like remember that the Lord loves you. And that the Lord loves you not only like in your interior life, in your prayer life, but through the people that you live with. One thing that I've had to undo is I was bullied a lot in elementary and middle school. And I didn't realize I had that baggage with me until I met with Dale, the psychologist who's available for us. And I worked through that. And I'm just like, I'm in an environment where I'm so loved and received. Like it's brought me to tears so many times how much I am loved by my brothers, that I just remind myself I'm not in that environment anymore. I don't have to withhold myself, because when someone's bullied, you naturally withhold yourself. You definitely, or sometimes like you'll make yourself transparent so you're someone that doesn't rock the boat. You get me? But just to like recognize I'm not in that environment anymore. I'm in such a nurturing environment. It's not easy. We've had challenges. I've been challenged, but you know what? The Lord has challenged me, and I've had to trust Him. Like He willed for me to be here in 2025, not 2024, not 2023, but now with these specific brothers. I could have, it could have been last year with three other brothers. No, with the 11 that I started with today, now eight. And of course the fully professed friars, the 10 that are living here. And clearly, as I've told you, like the Lord has been there. Everything was intentional. Everything was gradual. So it's like He's shown me time and time again that He's faithful with little things and not so little things. So I need to make sure I trust Him. I need to release. I need to let go. It's like a combination of I need to hold on to Him, but also let go. Like, surrender these things that are my securities and just allow myself to be formed. Um, be docile, be sincere. And I think sincerity is such a big aspect. Like, don't lie to yourself. God already knows everything. And the more honest you are with yourself in this process of discernment, the easier it will be for everybody. Because, we're here discerning. We're in postulancy. We're postulating to see if this is our way of life. And, if people leave at some point because they made a well discernment, it's like, good. A no is a step closer to your yes, you know? But for me right now, I mean, it's an absolute yes. I have I have no concerns, I am truly blessed to be here. I can't say that enough, you know.